Hi, and welcome to the Arlington County Regular Board Meeting that'll begin in just a few moments. But first, I'm going to walk you through how the meeting works. The County Board meets monthly with a break in August. Each meeting is divided into at least 2 sessions. At the end of each regular meeting, the board recesses and continues usually the following Tuesday. Each regular meeting starts with public comment. If you want to speak to the board, just submit a yellow speaker slip to the county clerk. Public comment is your chance to bring topics to the board that it may not be aware of, items that are not topics on that day's agenda, not already decided, and not scheduled for future hearings. One speaker will be heard on each topic and will have up to 2 minutes to speak. After public comment, the board takes up the consent agenda. These are groups of items, sometimes there are dozens of them, with no known issues that the chair brings to the board for a single vote. However, if you think an item on the consent agenda warrants discussion, submit a blue speaker slip to the clerk, asking that your item be removed. It's then up to the board to decide whether to move the item to the recess meeting for a public hearing. Okay, once that business is taken care of, we move on to the regular hearing items. Typically, these items include more complex, sometimes controversial issues. The board considers and votes on each of these items separately. The board may hear from staff, applicants, commissions, and the public before discussing the item and taking action. Okay, now you're ready for the meeting. Let's have a look at today's agenda.
All right. Good morning. Welcome to the January 25th, 2020 County Board Meeting. And I'm pleased to see everybody here. I believe we will be joined by our colleague Eric Gutschall soon. And but we will continue. Well, excellent timing, Mr. Gutschall. Very well done. Right on cue. Today, we've got, just as per usual, there is closed captioning on the overhead screen for those who have hearing assisted devices, and to help them with the hearing impaired, we have hearing assisted devices. If you need that, see our clerk. We have Spanish language translation available for the public comment period. And would our Spanish language translator please introduce yourself? Thank you so much. In English and Spanish, please.
Good morning, my name is Laura Castro, I'm the Spanish interpreter. Buenos días, mi nombre es Laura Castro, hay servicio de interpretación.
All right, thank you. Gracias. The podium right here can be lowered and raised. There's a little arrow on the buttons there if you need that. We'll encourage you to speak clearly into the microphone so everybody can hear your comments. And we will have our public comment speakers, which is how we begin our meeting, called 2 at a time, and ask you to just kind of move forward when you're about to be up. Finally, if you are submitting documents for the public hearing, please give them to our clerk and they will be distributed. We do ask that you submit 8 copies if you're submitting printed copies, and include your name and contact information on the documents, please. Finally, from time to time and during a meeting, actually this is a very short meeting, as you probably noticed when we saw our agenda, so I don't think we'll need to do that, but in a lot of our meetings we sometimes need to stand up, stretch our legs, and disappear from your view, but actually we have cameras and microphones in the back so we can see you even if you can't see us, and we stay in touch the whole time. So let's start our public comment period. Just a minute. Ms. Jacobs. No, that's fine. Would you please call the first 2 speakers for public comment?
Our first speaker is Jim Hurris, followed by Audrey Clement.
As an aside, there is no indication that item 42 is off limits for public comment. It's January, it's 45 degrees, and it's raining outside. Did any of you ride bicycles or e-scooters here this morning? Why not? That's what you want us to do. I'm mobility disabled, like others in the minority mobility disabled community. I'm sick and tired of having to dodge free-range bicyclists and scooter riders, including on the plaza just outside this building. If I'm injured in a public place in this county, it won't be by someone with a firearm, but by a bicycle or scooter rider. Earlier this month, I submitted a FOIA request to the county manager's office for information about bicycle and scooter accidents in Arlington during 2019. I received an 86 megabyte PDF file with information from 2018 and 2019, 86 megabytes. Reading the FOIA documents, it didn't take long to realize that e-scooters should have been banned from this county a year ago. There have been hundreds of e-scooter accidents. Some are reported to the police. Many are reported to the e-scooter rental companies, which do everything possible to avoid responsibility. It's obvious from the FOIA material that bicycles have become a cult. There is no concern about bicycle safety by anyone, county board, county staff, ACPD, ACFD, and the local media. You, the county board, are responsible for e-scooter accidents and injuries. You are largely responsible for accidents resulting from reckless behavior by bicyclists. But bicyclists are another special interest group you can't say no to, so the reckless behavior will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Our next speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by June O'Connell.
Welcome, members of the board and the county manager. I'm Audrey Clement from Westover. This letter was directed on January 18th to the WMATA Board Ethics Officer and/or WMATA Inspector General, pursuant to WMATA Board Code of Ethics, Article 11. On or about November the 7th, 2019, the WMATA Board sanctioned board member Christian Dorsey for failing to report timely a $10,000 campaign contribution he received from Amalgamated Transit Union 689, which represents Metro Transit workers. The Washington Post reported Dorsey's WMATA conflict of interest on November the 7th, including a pledge to return the money. The minutes of the November 7th, 2019 WMATA board meeting read in relevant part, quote, "The Ethics Committee determined that despite Mr. Dorsey's good faith disclosure and return of the $10,000 campaign contribution from Amalgamated Transit Union Local 689, he violated the Code of Ethics and should be reprimanded and removed as chair of the Finance and Capital Committee." While WMATA board minutes clearly indicate that Dorsey returned the $10,000 ATU contribution in accordance with its direction, I can find no evidence of the return of the contribution in Dorsey's campaign finance reports. As an Arlington resident who ran against Dorsey for Arlington County Board in 2019 and exposed his conflict of interest vis-a-vis ATU 689, I am requesting that the WMATA Board provide proof that Dorsey has indeed returned the contribution as it directed him to do. It is one thing to demand compliance with WMATA Board's Code of Ethics. It's another to determine whether this has actually occurred. Transparency requires both. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clement.
Our next speaker is June O'Connell, followed by Electra Bolatas.
I'll have copies for you. Good morning. I'm here this morning as an Arlington taxpayer to propose that Chairman Garvey request that the county manager report back to you at Tuesday's recess meeting on the process by which and the status of the 39 affordable units to which Gables Point 14, a new luxury apartment building, is committed. To recap, 5 years ago, a unanimous county board, including 3 of you, approved a high-rise site plan in the Ray Farm area, North Ralph, for 395 units, including 39 on-site affordable units, in addition to 14 units to replace Independent House. These units are not developer gifts. We Arlington taxpayers acquired them through density, zoning, and the like. They are our assets, and I believe that you and the manager must oversee them as good stewards. On January 15th, a story appeared on an online news outlet that Gables Point was welcoming new residents and had been for several months. I propose that on Tuesday's meeting, the manager report back to you on how Gables Point is filling those 39 units and how the housing office is coordinating with that leasing staff. Among the information that you might ask to be provided publicly, aka how does this work, is how many of the units have already been leased, what's the timeline, how has the leasing office learned to assess affordable applications. I'm not sure that the average 60 or 40%er just has an easy credit report, an easy employment check, and all those years of taxes. I don't know how they qualify. APA may know, AHC may know. I just want to know that Gables 14 knows how to screen those applicants. What units are they getting? Are they getting large, 2-bedrooms, small, 2 bedrooms? Thank you very much. I have 10 copies, including 2 for housing staff.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell.
Our next speaker is Electra Bolata, followed by Shamal Shepard.
Hello, good morning. I'm here to let you know that Ring is racist. As a teacher, I know that we need investments directly into the community instead of into surveillance capitalism. Ring is in the process of monopolizing the technology used by police departments around the U.S., already partnering with 600 police departments. It has a persuasive and expensive PR campaign that the vulnerable communities it targets cannot compete with. Ring provides training to police about how to bypass getting a warrant to access people's data, homes, and information. Even if Ring's users refuse to share data with police, police can go directly to Ring to demand data, undermining consent in a democratic process. Ring and surveillance technology changes the psychology and culture of communities. It undermines the right of expression, association, and people's abilities to assemble. This undermines the very foundations of a participatory democracy. Ring creates a form of psychological and structural violence, which lays the foundations for physical violence. Ring is invasive and racist because of the algorithms involved target and sort people based on race and targets people who are already vulnerable, like immigrants in our communities. Ring, as part of the Amazon Corporation and monopoly, claims to offer rebates and incentives for people to buy its product. However, these discounts are actually subsidized by up to $100,000 in local taxpayer money. Ultimately, Ring's purpose is to capitalize on fear, suspicion, racism, and exclusion. By allowing and facilitating Ring's partnership with the police department, the Arlington County Board invests into a community driven by fear, suspicion, and racism. We've warned you about Amazon's role as the backbone to ICE, and we now demand that you invest directly into communities, their needs, instead of corporations, surveillance, and racism. The only place in the country that has banned facial recognition technology is, ironically, in Silicon Valley, where this technology was created. Now is the time to show us where you stand with us or with racist corporations like Amazon and Ring. Will you be critical enough to see past their PR, or will we quietly fall victim to state violence? We demand you say no to Amazon's Regional Security Council and ADP's partnership with Ring.
Thank you, Ms. Bolata.
Our next speaker is Shamal Shepard.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here today to ask you all as board members to speak out and oppose the proposed Arlington Police Department and Ring partnership. This proposed partnership will only promote the hyper-surveillance and over-policing of our communities.
So, Mr. Shepard, thank you very much. Typically with consent items, we only have one speaker per issue, just to kind of keep this going and allow people to comment on other things. I think you're making, I assume you agree with Ms. Bolata and her comments.
On many other issues, but I'd like to speak to
Some
more.
other issues. And Mr. Maha Hilal, is he or she here? Yeah, and are you planning to say the same thing as well? Surveillance, yeah. I think you're all saying basically the same thing, and we've gotten it, which we understand, and typically we
Haven't
do
gotten a
not
chance
take
to
that.
say it yet.
We don't take that. We don't have the multiple comments on the same issue. So what I'd like to do.
The last two people to speak.
Excuse me?
We're the last two people to speak.
You are the last two to speak, so I'm going to check with my colleagues and see, because we usually don't do this. I don't want to take, because otherwise we'll never get to our meetings. Colleagues, do you want to hear the last two speakers? Everybody's fine with it, then please, I just want you to know that that's what we usually do, because there are other times people are going to come and want to have multiple, and we're not going to allow that for consent. It's just simply to keep the meetings moving, but you're absolutely right. There are only two speakers, yourself and one other, so go ahead, and the board is fine with it, so please continue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It takes no expert to understand that these tactics will disproportionately criminalize and endanger people of color in our community, especially immigrant populations, as they have done so historically. We believe that we keep our communities safe, and as Virginia residents, we refuse to live in fear of each other. If Arlington Police Department want to serve the community as they are hired to do, they will focus on building partnerships and relationships with us, not with Amazon and not with Ring. With that, I'm asking you all as representatives to speak up against Amazon's plan for the Security Council over DC and Virginia areas. So thank you.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Ms. Halal?
So, good morning. I want to speak sort of more broadly to surveillance. My two colleagues ahead of me spoke to the Ring doorbell that is being promoted around the country and where different jurisdictions are choosing to cooperate with the police. So I'm Muslim, and I work for an organization called Justice for Muslims Collective. And one of the issues that continues to persist when it comes to the state targeting Muslims is surveillance. Since 9/11, there has been a huge increase in the amount of surveillance targeting not just Muslims, but other people of color. And we've come to this chamber many times before to bring light to and raise awareness of the ways in which Amazon in particular will be harming and has harmed our communities already. And Ring doorbell is just one of the ways in which Amazon is promoting surveillance. And I think it's imperative for those of us in this room and for all of you who are, in charge of and who sort of give direction to what's happening in this area to really take into account the fear that surveillance causes different communities of color. It's not, it's very difficult as a person of color, as a Muslim, to know that I'm being surveilled constantly, and to know that city and county officials are collaborating with and emboldening different aspects of the surveillance apparatus. And so I think it's just...
It's all right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's
So-
just to give you a warning. It's
Yes.
okay.
And I think, the most important thing here is that people be aware of, and the community members, the citizens, really understand what is happening, how surveillance is impacting them, because this is a very real threat. This is a very real fear. And I think it's really important that communities of color be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any more speakers?
That is our final speaker.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody coming today. First, we had Mr. Hers, and he was concerned about the safety with scooters and bicycles in particular, and wanted us to ban those items, as I understand, and has submitted a FOIA request, which I believe he got the information back from. Mr. Hers, there you are. And I would say that we take safety very, very seriously, and I understand that you said you're older, or I don't know, you didn't say, you said you were having trouble, being mobile, and it's hard for you to use scooters and bicycles and you feel unsafe. I totally understand. I have a few mobility problems myself. We hear from folks a lot, and when we approved the regulations for scooters, e-scooters in Arlington and bicycles, we made it clear there were areas they were not to be, and that safety was a major concern, and we will continue to focus on safety of those items. The state doesn't allow us to ban them. Do any of my colleagues want to make any other comments on this item? No? Thank you. Then we come to Ms. Clement, and she would like to, I think probably the WMATA board perhaps is the place to go to get confirmation that Mr. Dorsey has filed as he needs to. And I will ask Mr. Dorsey to comment. I would like to say first that Mr. Dorsey gives incredibly good service to us. We are lucky here in Arlington. The region is lucky, and the state is lucky that we have Mr. Dorsey on the WMATA board. He's an excellent board member, provides outstanding service at no small cost to himself, and we really appreciate his work. Mr. Dorsey, would you like to make any comments?
Oh, I very much appreciate that, Madam Chair. And Ms. Clement, sorry you waited to bring this to us today. You could have cleared this up a while ago. As you probably are aware, when you file campaign finance reports, you cannot just simply document the return of a check. You can only document it when that check has been deposited by the recipient. It hadn't been, so we've made other arrangements to transfer the funds directly. When you look at my next campaign finance report, you will see it.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. All right, and then we had Ms. O'Connell coming in. And Ms. O'Connell, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate your concern that the information about affordable units is out there and everybody has equal access. You've been talking to us about this for a while. I really appreciate it. You're requesting a report from our manager on Tuesday. I'm not sure if that is quite possible because of timing and a few things like that, but I will ask the manager if he'd like to comment on this.
Sure. First of all, I always welcome Ms. O'Connell. Feel free to send us an email so that we can have a little bit of lead time, but we are in the process right now of pulling together that information. I hope to have it to you by Tuesday. We've had some conversations with staff, and I'll at least give an update as to where we are in gathering that information.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Chairman Garvey?
Yes,
Just
yes,
to comment
yes.
on that.
Ms. Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'm looking forward to hearing from that too. I think it's sort of a unique and interesting issue about when we are able to achieve these on-site CAFs. And so I think this could be a representative one. Look forward to hearing more. And just wanted to say to Ms. O'Connell, thank you for the continued advocacy. And I don't know if you noticed, but we now, our housing staff, now has the practice of listing by month the available committed affordable residences in the county. I don't see Gable's Point on it, so I think that maybe proves your point. Right. We can. I'll catch you and follow up with you separately because I'm really interested in continuing to explore it and appreciate your attention to it.
All right. Is that it? Thank you. And again, thank you, Ms. O'Connell, for coming and bringing that to our attention. Mr. Manager, we look forward to the report. Appreciate it. And then we had Ms. Bolota here, and we had Mr. Shepard and Ms. Halal come and talk about Ring and surveillance and Amazon. Appreciate your concerns. I think the idea of your personal information and security, all of that kind of personal security issue is one that's just a major cultural issue for all of us. It's something that concerns all of us in what we do. There are limits to what we do. I think there also, this is not an item that's before us right now. It will be coming, but we're not even sure exactly in what form it will come. And at this moment, I will ask the manager to comment a little bit about what he expects we might be seeing. I think it's in a month or so you think this will come?
First, actually, I'm going to toss it over to my friend, the county attorney, who can talk a little bit about the status, because right now there is no signed agreement between the Arlington County Police Department and Ring, and so his office is involved in this part of the process. And then I'll comment on some of the issues related to, if it comes to pass, sort of what the issues are that we focused on and how we're going to handle them.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. McIsaac.
Madam Chair, we are working with the police department on reviewing the terms and conditions of the sort of standard Ring agreement. There are some, it's a document that's generated under California law. There's a lot of sort of lawyerly issues that give us pause about entering into the agreement. So we're still trying to work through some of those terms and conditions. It is potentially so, in fact, is a good probability that to the extent we can resolve those, this will proceed in sort of like a normal sort of software kind of procurement that would be handled by the purchasing agent. It's not, as I understand the terms and conditions at this point, necessarily a unique agreement. It's not unlike purchasing, computer software. And so for that reason, it's already, the authority to enter into the agreement has already been delegated to the purchasing agent. So it may very well be an agreement that's approved at that level. Of course, with our final sign-off, the county attorney's final sign-off, it may not actually have to come to the board at all. Yeah, but as I said, we're still working through the terms and conditions. If you didn't hear me, what I said was it may very well be an agreement that is just brought to the purchasing agent and is resolved at that level. If it turns out the agreement is different from the normal software acquisition, then it would be brought to the board.
So thank you. I suspect that does not make the folks who came today feel more feel good about it. So I would like to turn to our manager to talk a little bit about some of the things that do understandably concern folks.
And so Mr. McIsaac was talking about the internal process for approval. I'll tell you right now that if we do get to the point where we're going to enter into an agreement, I will let the board know, and I'll let the community know. And so as a preface to that, let me explain a little bit about my current understanding of how that agreement could work. And it's an agreement, as some of the speakers have pointed out to, that is in place in many jurisdictions across the United States. I can't speak to those specific agreements. But what this involves is the users of Ring, the people in the neighborhoods, they have an app on their door. I don't have one. I don't know exactly how it works, but essentially they can take video, and that video is uploaded to something called a neighborhood app, which is, it's for me to understand it. It was sort of like going to YouTube. It's something that gets posted and it's publicly available, period. That's what happens. And so that essentially is what Ring does. And so the question then becomes, what, if any, relationship does the police department have with that? The police department has absolutely no say in what individuals put up to this. It's an individual decision about what they post to this portal. The Arlington County Police Department has no control over what people post. The Arlington County Police Department would never have access to live feeds of what's going on with a Ring device. Individuals would be unable to share information directly with the Arlington County Police Department. That simply isn't going to be permitted under whatever understanding we have. And what happens is that individuals can, on their own, this has nothing to do with the county police department, decide that they want their information to go into something called the law enforcement portal. That's completely at the discretion of the individuals who own the Ring device. And once that information is put up to this law enforcement portal, to the extent that the police department has any interest in video, because it may surround a specific case or incident that happened, then they can get onto that sort of portal and review some of the information. My understanding is that before any of the information actually even makes it to that portal, the whoever runs Ring makes sure that the information that's posted is reviewed, and the staff that do that review have implicit bias training and go through a series of workshops. But leaving that aside, any individuals from the police department that wanted to get access to that, there would be very few individuals that would be allowed that, and they go through a series of trainings. And again, this is information that would only be used to the extent there was a specific incident that was related to it. And by the way, the police won't be able to tell who the person is that uploaded it or exactly where it is. What the police department actually will do is it's something they've done all along, which is to the extent there's ever a criminal incident in a neighborhood, they can, separate from this, engage in their investigative procedures and canvass a neighborhood and ask for information. And so that Ring has nothing to do with that specifically, but it may be that an individual homeowner might want to provide that information to the police department. There's a lot more in that. I've had conversation with the chief. We have some very rigorous internal guidelines on how, if the video ever came to us, how it would be used and how it would be stored, how it would be secured, who would have access to it, and how they can look at it. And that's consistent with all our practices. When we get video now, we've received video for a long time, and this is just another way to get video for investigative uses.
Thank you. we have a little time. I'm going to indulge myself in a few questions.
Sure.
I don't understand, then I'll ask my colleagues if they've got any questions or comments. So listening to this, because this is relatively new to me, it hasn't come to us, I haven't studied it. So it sounds like this is like surveillance cameras, except that there's a technology to make it move better. I mean, surveillance cameras have always been there, and they take pictures of people, and they can get turned over. The film can get turned over, because I have for years seen it on YouTube and news reports and things. Is that a reasonable comparison?
It sounds like it to me. As I've learned about this, I don't know if the county attorney wants to weigh on this, which is that individuals, in the county, residents, have a right to take their iPhone and whatever it is and film. They can do that. There's no protection under the Code of Virginia that says you can't be filmed as you're walking down a street. So that itself may present some interesting questions or issues, but that is the current state of law. And people can do that. And so I understand people's concerns. If I'm walking down the street, I'm not sure I want anybody filming me, but that's actually, those Ring doorbells will pick up a slice of what's happening in front of the door. But it's no different in that, actually it's probably less capable than someone holding an iPhone and sort of taking a video.
Thank you. And then can people buy Ring devices now for their homes?
Oh, yes, actually, I think that Arlington County is saturated with Ring devices, at least based on my personal experience of driving around.
And if they get some film, are they able themselves to post this up on the, do we enable that, or is that something they can do now?
No, this is completely at the individual's discretion. They can post it wherever they'd like and however they would like. That has nothing to do with the county or the police department. Those are individual decisions.
Thank you. So right now, we don't have the ability, and I doubt we ever would, to tell people they can't purchase this device and they can't post things. We can't do that, right?
This is an individual decision about what they choose to do.
Thank you.
And we have no role in that, nor should we have a role in that.
Thank you. That's helpful. Mr. Gutschall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that line of questioning. And I actually have a couple of comments here and then a request perhaps from our attorney and our staff, which is I think that that this is probably maybe among the first of what will be a continuing series of this tension between new technology and the questions that society has to face. And one of the questions I have is we've put up all these cameras around all of our intersections that are also recording video. And I understand that that footage from those cameras, and there's cameras on the dashboards of our police cruisers, right? So we are ourselves collecting a lot of video and data, but I've heard before that we don't necessarily retain that. We have a policy on how long we retain that. So one of my questions, and if we're going to talk about this at a future board meeting, would be sort of a complete understanding of what surveillance technology do we have, whether we own it or whether the community owns it, and how are we using it? What is our policies of how long it is retained? And who sets that policy? Is that policy that's being set by the chief of police, or is it policy that is being set by this board? And I think that's something that we ought to explore, because I, for one, think that we need to explore that, because we need to manage this well. Because like I said, I think this is going to be the first of many conversations and tension points. And I think it's the history, in my view, it's the history of society, and in a particular of American society, of this tension between individual rights and the freedom from the right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure, and then also the right of the community to feel safe and of the police to be able to do their work. And I think you can take it from one extreme to the next. I think if you have the police are desiring to use footage from these Ring devices that are capturing video, and I think the real aspect of these Ring devices, Chair Garvey, is that the video goes essentially straight to the cloud. So the video is out there. That's why you're able to see it on your phone. So it's capturing a great deal of data, whereas the old-fashioned sort of security systems that people had, that video, you could record that in your own house, like have your own little server, but that was more cumbersome to get to. So the fact that the Ring system is putting the video immediately accessible up on the cloud, where it can be posted, links to it can be posted on Nextdoor and those kinds of things, so it's easier to share with everyone, including share with the police. But my point is that I think that if a little girl goes missing and the neighborhood was able to use the technology to locate that child, I think most people would say, hooray, that's a great use of the technology, this is successful at work, nobody's rights were violated. But if the technology is used because someone said, well, I saw a suspicious-looking individual, like a teenager, who seemed to be prowling around the neighborhood, and lo and behold, someone says, well, guess what? My bicycle is missing. And then the police decide, well, we really want to find that teenager. Then you can see how you get into, Pandora's box is open, and you get into all kinds of issues in terms of equity and fairness and individual rights. And I think we need to explore that. So I'm looking towards, in my ask of the manager, is can staff maybe come back with some recommendations of what the process would look like, and how we would do some kind of policy statement on this, on how we would use technology
So, Mr. Gutschall, this is an example of my maybe being here too long. This is actually the second time I can remember the board wrestling with this issue. The first time was when we had school bus cameras that were put on school buses, which were able to take pictures of scofflaws who zoom past school buses. And the question, since they were taking pictures, what was in the range of the photograph? And at that time, we had a pretty extensive discussion about what our policies were. I absolutely think it's time to revisit that question, and I'd be more than happy to come back to you about what our internal policies are. We're also guided to a certain extent by the Library of Virginia, which has criteria about what information we can gather and how long we can keep it. And then the county attorney can regale you with stories, I think, about litigation concerning how we are able to store data and issues that have been percolating, because there are a whole series of questions that have been raised in a number of places about this. So I'd be more than happy to come back and sort of have a comprehensive conversation about what our policy is, and to the extent that we also I've had an open data group in an advisory group that's looking at privacy issues, to the extent they've provided us information and recommendations what those are.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful to us. And a very quick anecdote, which maybe makes the point of some of the folks that came to testify here. The other day, I was online. I don't remember if it was on Twitter or where, and there was some ad. I think it was an ad that came up that said, this sanitation worker is a hero in Arlington. Arlington sanitation workers are a hero. And I bit the bait and I clicked into it, only to find that it was Ring video of a sanitation worker, not in Arlington, but actually in somewhere in Wisconsin. And truth be told, the sanitation worker had helped an old lady bring her trash can in. And it was a nice little feel-good story, but it wasn't actually in Arlington. So it is, I think I can understand and empathize with the folks that are here to testify that the Ring folks, I think, absolutely are on a PR campaign trying to promote the good that can come of their product and their service. And I think we need to acknowledge, and that's why I think we need a policy that's been thought through so we can wrestle with that and make sure that we're not unduly influenced by those feel-good stories.
Thank you very much. This is certainly a major issue for our era. I'm going to go to Mr. DeFranti, back to Ms. Crystal, and finish up with Mr. Dorsey. Mr. DeFranti.
Thank you. Thank you to those who came. I respect your concerns that were identified. They're certainly reasonable to have, and I have been concerned about this. Thank you to the manager and the county attorney for providing a little bit of context. I have asked questions about this, and I will continue to. Just to make sure that they fit with some of the legal issues that Mr. Gutschall raised. Three thoughts. First, my understanding is that the individual must approve for any video to be shared. Second, the specifics of the case, if there is, my understanding is that the police must have, would only be able to do this in cases where there's a specific crime in an area. So that, I think, is going to be very important. And last, to the cell phone analogy, I actually asked a question like that and got a little background, right? If you are walking down the street and you put a cell phone out and you take a video, you don't have an expectation of privacy. But if you, if you're next door to a neighbor and you have a camera that goes into their apartment, you absolutely have a expectation of privacy, and that would be in violation of my understanding of the law. So it's the specifics that will be key for me. The details of how this done will be key for me. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Ms. Crystal.
Great. Thank you very much, Chairman Garvey. Mr. Manager, appreciate the update. And we've had some opportunity to engage in the conversation with this because, and I appreciate this very much, ACPD has proactively gone out to the NAACP, to some representatives of our Latino parents organizations and other longstanding stakeholders in the community, which I think is essential as a place to start. And so they've raised some good questions. I think to maybe just put a finer point on something that Mr. Gutschall was saying, my biggest concern actually is not well, I suppose this would be a concern as well, the police getting something without the ring owner's permission, but rather this idea, and I think this has surfaced in some of the comments, of just a free-flowing, circulating, proactive data stream, video stream being shared with our police. I think if you monitor Nextdoor, some of our other community listservs, our police may be trained in implicit bias, but everybody in this community isn't. And I think, as Mr. Gutschall's point indicated, it is highly likely that when people say somebody is a suspicious character, that is coded. And so I am really interested in refining, and I know this is something we've discussed before, being really specific and clear, as I think you started to allude to, Mr. Manager, that police cannot receive proactive information about quote-unquote suspicious characters in the neighborhood, but also maybe getting even clearer on the point about police's access to these videos. My understanding is there needs to be an active investigation, and I'm not sure how that came through with the law enforcement portal you described, so a little more clarity in that when it comes back to us, because as Chair Garvey indicated, I think we are going to want to see this again. I have just one other question, Mr. Manager, which you may know off the top of your head. Is there any financial arrangement as part of what's being discussed, or this is solely about data sharing and privacy?
There's no financial arrangement whatsoever. Okay. And I just wanted to add a comment because I think that it's absolutely correct. You know, the police have been trained in implicit bias. I'm very proud of the way our police conduct themselves. And if I can make an unfortunate analogy to some of the conversations we've been listening to the last few days on the other side of the river, you can have all sorts of rules in place. You can have all sorts of criteria. At the end of the day, it comes down to individuals, you know, doing the right thing. And our police are proud of their role in making this a diverse and inclusive community. And, you know, I stand by them shoulder to shoulder in their commitment to it. Our police chief has been emphatic. Anytime there is anything approaching even a sniff of impropriety, he deals with it very effectively and very directly. So as I recommend and I urge us to have a very broad conversation about privacy principles, rules, criteria, standards. At the end of the day, it comes down to an individual making the right decision. And that's a challenge for all of us, but if we need to do better, we will. But I'm very comfortable right now that we're doing the best we can, and we will, doesn't mean we won't fail, but we'll do our best.
Thanks, Mr. Manager. I appreciate that. I just wanted to follow up. I'm sorry to yank the line of conversation back after that excellent point, which I agree with. But just with regard to there being no commitment of dollars, I'm really glad to see that, and I really appreciated the comments made by some of our commenters being concerned about spending resources, you know, in these sorts of partnerships with corporations. I agree. I think as Ms. Balota, thank you for your service educating students that money should be going to our young people, to our vulnerable population. And to those of you, I know your coalition is broad and expands across jurisdictional boundaries, but those of you who live in Arlington or work in Arlington or just care about Arlington, I would love to have your insights on our budget process, which is going to begin next month. And as we have those conversations about where our dollars go for our young people, for those who need housing and otherwise maybe marginalized or struggling in our community, really love to hear from you, because I know we'll hear from a lot of other community voices as well. So thank you.
Madam Chair, one other point, because I know I was asked the specific question. I did want to answer it, which is that on the video request tool, which Ring has, that when making a request to Ring by the police, if they actually make a request, they have to reference a relevant case. They must do that. And they can only request recordings within a limited time frame and a limited area. And with that request, the device owner must decide whether to share the video. Okay, so this is not something where the police department can pull the data. It must be done with the consent of the party that has taken the video.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Manager.
if I could just
Mr. McIsaac.
Echo what Mr. Schwartz just said. This is very much like the cameras that exist throughout the county currently. For instance, you know, 7-Elevens, restaurants, parking lots. I'm sorry. There are video cameras that individuals post on their own property. When there's some incident in that vicinity, the police will typically go and ask them, the owner of the property, if they could see the feed. Now, the individual doesn't have to give that camera. If the police really wanted to see it, they'd have to go to a court and get a search warrant and show probable cause for why they should get the video, but they have no right to access it. the way this Ring technology is set up and the way the agreement is structured, it is very much like that. It is designed to protect the individuals who have the equipment. Ring has no ability to give the police information about the individuals who own the cameras. It's a request to the individuals. If they don't want to give it up, they don't have to. And if the police really see a law enforcement purpose for it, they can go to the courts and ask permission to get access to it. So it's attempted to be very controlled. Obviously, all of this technology is subject to abuse, and I think that's what the manager is talking about with the police department. There's a rigorous effort to try to prevent any kind of abuse in using the technology. So that's something you'll learn more about.
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you. I think just before I have a couple comments, just do want to put a couple questions out there. Maybe the first one is for Mr. McIsaac, and thank you for where you just led us, because that really influences my first question. Give him a chance to finish his conversation.
Sorry.
So, Mr. McIsaac, it's my understanding that in addition to, existing video feeds that may exist elsewhere, also each of us, if we carry a smartphone and have location services open, police departments can seek through, some sort of a court order access to that information, right?
That's right, but it is controlled by the courts.
Right, right.
Right. This is, it's protected information to you alone, unless you've posted it up on, as Mr. Gutschall was saying, you've put it out in some public location, like on the cloud or on Facebook or whatever it might be. Otherwise, you can't get access to it without court permission.
That is exactly where I was going. And then the second question, Mr. Schwartz, I understand that in some communities across the country, this Ring partnership with law enforcement has come with an agreement that police officers will promote Ring as something in the community that people should use to keep themselves safe. I'm going to ask in a way which is going to certainly indicate what I feel about that, but that is not in any way a part of any conversation that we've been having with the company, is it?
Absolutely not, and I would never entertain that, and the police have never come to me and suggested that.
Thank you. So the larger comments, I mean, this is really an important issue. I'm glad we're having it today. I'm glad that people are bringing it up. I would like to at least express from my perspective, I think we are talking about something in the micro that is a hugely important macro issue. Ring is the subject of our conversation, but what Ring is no different than what Google Nest is and what many other companies are currently doing. We're using Ring discreetly, but I hope everybody recognizes it's not about one company, one app, one process. This is a lot of people competing for this space to figure out how to do something which has been afoot for a long time, how to take the data that we produce, whether it is our video, it is our location, it is our thoughts, our actions, our connections, our private information, how to take that stuff, which if we had thought about it at all, we would have assumed was private, or at least we could control who got access to it. There has been a devolution where that has been commoditized so that is made available through these technology platforms. It's made some people phenomenally rich in our country, and the people who are providing that data are certainly not getting compensated for it, and at worst are having their civil liberties violated. This is a huge issue, much beyond the scope of Arlington County to deal with. In many cases, it's far beyond the capacity of our state to deal with. This is an absolute important national issue that needs to be dealt with. But speaking specifically about surveillance technology and these conversations from all of you and Mr. McIsaac, I think are just really important for our community to understand. This is the sort of evolution of what has been possible for a long time. There is a lot of video of people captured, and that can be used for law enforcement purposes. And if you don't have law enforcement who are implicit, biased, trained, aware, sensitive, or you don't have public bodies that have put guardrails around their use, this can be used for nefarious purposes that impact marginalized people. We have to figure out how to fix it. I don't have any confidence that Ring or Google or Facebook or any other company is going to necessarily do the implicit bias training of their employees to do the appropriate guardrails. That's up to us. That's why we do it. But to think that there is one action or statement or local ordinance that we could enact that would stop this, it's not possible. And I'm not even gonna pander to anyone and pretend that it is. What we do have to do is have that larger conversation about how we ensure that all of the technological advances that are facilitating what has long been possible just by ordinary practices, how we make sure that that doesn't continue a country that treats people who are different as others and therefore subjects them to criminal justice experiences and the like. So we can't resolve it this morning. Something that as you all know, I think about a ton, and we will continue the conversation in another way. But thanks to everyone who instigated this conversation this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey, and thank you, everyone. So, you know, Mr. Dorsey said this isn't just about us, it's a national issue. This is a global issue, and if I can get even more broad about it, this is about human evolution. So, to me, this technology, it's a tool. Throughout human evolution, we've been making tools. And throughout human evolution, they can be used for good or ill. So probably one of the first one was when somebody invented a spear so that they could hunt better and feed everybody better. That's a good thing. And then somebody used that spear to kill another person. That's a bad thing. All the way through history, all of the tools we've made, it's part of being human. They can be used for good or they can be used for ill. And part of our job in government is to try to set up the structures that, as much as possible, make it that tools can only be used for good. But as long as people are people, there are going to be problems. And I think what we are, it's very clear to me, while our lawyer said that this could not, maybe not even come before the board, this has to come before the board, at least in the context, I think, of a really major discussion on privacy, civil liberties, and what we can do to structure our community and our society in a way that pushes people, forces as much as we can to use these tools for good and not for ill. But it's a huge issue. It's part of the condition that we are all in, and we all need to work on it, and we're all concerned about it. Again, I appreciate you coming. This was just the start of a really major conversation. We will do what we can here in Arlington, and we appreciate your interest in it and your support in it, and the conversation will continue. So thank you very much. All right, I think that takes us now to our consent agenda. Madam, thank you all for coming. Madam, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, which is going to be short. I'm sure it'll be very exciting. Madam Clerk, have there been any items that have been pulled from the consent agenda? Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, items number 17, 18, and 29.
And 29. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve our consent agenda with the exclusion of items 17, 18, and 29.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Madam
We have
Chair.
a second. Yes? Yes, Mr. DeFranti? 13. Would you like to pull item 13?
I just had a question on that one, that item.
Okay. Yep.
Since it's in the first category, is that something that we received correspondence on?
Public, we may have, yes. Let me look. I don't remember the numbers and the.
Well, there was.
This was a permit for family daycare. We did have a request. Did we not, Madam Clerk, have a request to pull item 13? Was that the one? But not a request. Thank you. I think it's. I think the daycare item was was 17 or 18. I think it was 17. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we're pulling 18 as well. So both of those have been requested to be pulled. Have been pulled. Nobody requested to pull 13. Would you like to request to pull it?
No, I'm fine with it. There were two letters. The first one did not request to pull. The second one, I don't think did either. I just want to make sure we covered it.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, I appreciate you catching that. All right. I think motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adopting the consent items minus items 17, 18, and 29, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Item passes 5-0. So I will make just a few comments. So the consent agenda, we have lots of items that come up before us on consent, and they're put on consent. We just do them all together because they're thought to be non-controversial. And obviously, if somebody decides this is controversial to them, They can request to have it pulled, as you saw happen, and then it gets pulled and it will be carried over, and we will discuss it and have a public hearing on it at our Tuesday meeting, and you're welcome to come back for that. And then of all of the items that we passed, why they're not controversial, that doesn't mean they're not important. So I'm going to just go ahead and highlight a few of the kind of interesting things that we have done tonight, or the more important things. First, our child care initiative, I'd just like to point out, continues to have an impact, and we are seeing more and more small child care providers, and they're coming in for use permits to expand their capacity to the now, what they're able to go up to 12 children by right, and so they're coming in for that, and I think that's great. It's increasing our supply of child care providers and the child care slots in the county, and we're very happy that that's helping to increase our goal, to achieve our goal of increasing the supply of high-quality childcare in Arlington. We also amended the zoning ordinance to allow elder care housing, so we're going from children to older folks, allow elder housing in the Clarendon Revitalization District, and this is to complete our overhaul of regulations for assisted living and elder care facilities, and it greatly expands the places where assisted living facilities, nursing homes, independent living facilities, and continuing care retirement communities are allowed, and that's definitely a need here, and this just completes our work on that area. We also approved the award of $1.1 million for a contract for a neighborhood conservation project on 20th Road North between North Vermont Street and North Utah Street in Waverly Hills. This project is to improve pedestrian safety. We are concerned about pedestrian safety by adding sidewalks, ADA curb ramps, and crosswalks along the stretch of 20th Road North, and it also is going to add some much-needed stormwater infrastructure capacity. We've also approved a $1.4 million contract to improve North Highland Street, North Garfield Street, North Oakland Street, and North Fillmore Street intersections with North Pershing Drive. And there were going to be new curb extensions. We're improving bus stops, adding ADA-compliant sidewalks, curb ramps, high-visibility crosswalks, again, all in the interest of safety and helping people get around. We will also upgrade the traffic signal at the intersection of North Pershing and North Fillmore Street and install a bioretention system at the North Oakland Street intersection to filter stormwater runoff. And this is just the first of 3 phases that are planned for that corridor between North Barton and North Piedmont Streets. We have approved a $4.5 million contract to rehabilitate a water main in the right-of-way of North Glebe Road between North Old Glebe Road and Little Falls Road. And this project will line the damaged main. We have a main that was quite damaged, and it will both line the main and replace some of it. The good news is that we've arranged it so traffic will not be disrupted during the project, or at least not much. DES, our Department of Environmental Services, is going to coordinate with the affected residents in advance of any short-term water shutoffs, which will need to happen at time, but we will let folks know and give them a chance to prepare for that. And all the shutdowns will be limited to construction hours during the working day. Also, might want to make sure in this very busy election year of 2020, we are relocating 2 polling places. We approved the relocation of the Overly Knolls Precinct number 17 and the Roslyn Precinct number 19. Both have been impacted by construction. So those of you who vote on Overly Knolls Precinct, that's number 17, will move from the Reed School to Resurrection Lutheran Church at 6201 Washington Boulevard. Roslyn Precinct 19's polling place is moving from 1911 Fort Myer Drive to the Heights, which is H.B. Woodlawn's new home just across the street, basically, from us here at 1601 Wilson Boulevard. And these changes will apply to all the elections in 2020, including the presidential primary and the election in November. And also, everybody's going to get, you don't have to just listen to our meeting, everybody's going to get cards to inform them of that change if that's where they vote. Moving on. We also approved an important memorandum of agreement with Arlington National Cemetery and some other entities. This one is fascinating to me. The other entities include the Catawba Indian Nation and the Pamunkey Indian Tribe, and this is related to the cemetery's Southern Expansion Project. How the Indian Nation and Indian tribes fit into it, I don't actually know, but I'm planning to do a little historic research because it's fascinating to me. So this is a 70-acre project, and it's in the general vicinity. I asked the staff to put up a picture here so you can see where it is. General vicinity of Columbia Pike, Washington Boulevard interchanges. It's adjacent to the Pentagon and near Southgate Road. It's going to provide a lot more burial capacity, which the cemetery is needing. So the MOA that we've just approved is meant to ensure that any harm done to historic elements will be mitigated, and we know this project's going to affect some things. There is a blue granite boundary wall, which you can just see in the distance there between the cemetery and the cars, and that dates to 1897. That wall is going to be partially removed. Also, about 1.7 acres of the Air Force Memorial, including Air Force Memorial Drive and parking spaces, will be converted to burial and pedestrian space. This is all what the cemetery is doing. This is not us. But the cemetery has agreed with us in this MOA to reuse some of the wall's salvaged stones to repair what is left and restore and preserve some of that historic wall. The cemetery will also install an interpretive sign at the intersection of Clayton and Jessup Drives, which will document the location, purposes, and composition of the Freedmen's Village, which is an all too little known and understood part of our important history. And I'm pleased that that's going to be done, and we're going to do more to highlight that. And there'll be an interpretation showing the original design of the Air Force Memorial. Finally, we are excited about another memorandum of agreement with 6 Pentagon City commercial property owners that the board approved today that commits the county and the property owners, who include the owners of Pentagon Row, Pentagon City Mall, the TSA Building, Penn Place, Metropolitan Park, Agency Care of Arlington, and River House, to go a coordinated and comprehensive study of the Pentagon City here area, and it's all shown here encircled in red. In addition to the growth the board has approved for Penn Place and Met Park blocks of this PDSP, the county has received or anticipates receiving proposals that will cumulatively total several million square feet of additional growth in this Pentagon City Metro Station area. So it's important that as those proposals come in, they be reviewed in a holistic way. This is something the community has been asking us for for a long time, so that we will assess the capacity of the transportation network and other local infrastructure and community facilities all as a whole, and how they all fit together and not just do them separately. The county will provide $500,000 in staff support, $550,000 for transportation consulting services, and the property owners are going to contribute $475,000. And as I stated, we're determined that all the proposals that come in are not reviewed separately or on an ad hoc basis. And this will help build on the PDSP's strategic plan for sustainable growth in this area by assessing the capacity of the transportation network and other local infrastructure and community facilities. Finally, the Memorandum of Understanding covers issues including the general approach to the planning study, the anticipated community engagement process and schedule. There's going to be lots of engagement. It'll be involved in the property owners as stakeholders and specific. It will involve the property owners as stakeholders and specific, and also handle the specific mechanics dealing with how the MOA will be executed. So that's just a bit of what we did today with our consent items. And with that, I think we only have perhaps one more item. Madam Clerk, I believe we have one more item.
That's correct, Madam Chair, which is the contract renewal for the county manager, county attorney, clerk to the county board, and the county auditor.
Thank you very much. And this is not a public hearing item. May I have a motion to approve the contracts?
Madam Chair, move approval of the contracts.
Thank you very much. Second?
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Motion has been approved at 5-0. Thank you very much. And I probably should have maybe Mr. McIsaac, was that good enough as far as the motion went? Because I see I have actually a more detailed item here.
I think what is implicit in that is that you're authorizing the chairman to sign those agreements on behalf of the board.
Thank you. I think it was too. I think we're done. Thank you so much. All right. And now finally, I have one more item to convene us in closed. We're going to go into closed meeting, and I would like to move that the county board convene a closed meeting as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.23711A8 for the following purpose. One matter requiring consultation with the county attorney concerning the legal bases for the county's authority to require payment by county contractors of payment to subcontractors and independent contractors providing services under the county's contract with the contractor, and the county's authority to contribute funds to nonprofit and other organizations providing services in the county. May I have a second? Second. All right, been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Thank you. We are now going into closed session. Thank you all for being here. Have a good weekend. I don't know. Probably, I think there Only such business matters as were identified in the motion or wish to close meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Second. Thank you. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Garvey? Mr. Gutschall? Yes. Mr. DeFerranti? Aye. Ms. Crystal? Yes. Mr. Dorsey?